passage.
Il est passé. Super, l'artiste. Super, encore un but sensationnel. That's a brilliant bit of follow-up play by Mahe. Oh my goodness me, what a shot.
Sagosen setter det hen! Han setter den! De er i semifinale igjen!
Hello and welcome to the Uninformed Handball Hour's Champions League launch party. Coming halfway through the second game week, so we'll have only 1.5 weeks of Champions League handball to direct us in the wrong direction and get our reflections for the season. If you do want to hear about the other half match day that we're not covering on this podcast, it was a pretty good one. So we decided to make that its own Morning Club episode available only to Patreon listeners. Well, we'll go into the big games between Barcelona and Szeged, as well as Veszprém's demolition of PSG. That's available for all Patreon listeners. Again, now's a good time to sign up. Thank you for everyone who has signed up, stuck with us on our Patreon. But just for $3 a month, you can sign up for our Patreon to get the extra Morning Club episodes, bonus content, Discord, all of the fun stuff. So head on over to patreon.com/handball hour to listen to us talking about those two really, really exciting games. We're just going to talk about what the teams look like so far, how they're shaping up for the season, go through both groups. And for that, it's me, Alex Kulesh, and I've got Chris O'Reilly with me. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm good. Yeah, interesting start to the season. Been commentating in a few games, trying to watch a few more, and yeah, particularly one of the groups, which we'll get to, is living up to the preseason hype already, I think.
Yeah, it's been a good start. It's been, again, a little bit of a cold start, I think. The games came very quickly, but the crowds have been really good. The games have been good, and it does look very open this year. Again, does it really matter? We won't get into it, but I think we've discussed it enough that it definitely matters in some ways to be towards the top of your group, to give you the chances to win the Champions League in the end. But we will have to probably touch on the big change this year for the Champions League, and that is, of course, EHFTV transferring to a paid platform. This is something that actually we have to give props to John Ryan. John Ryan, was it last year or the season before, when EHFTV, you had to make an account for EHFTV. John Ryan from Team Handball News immediately clocked that and was like, okay, they must be going to a subscription model. They must be. Everyone EHF stayed quiet. No one was like, no, this is just normal, the GDPR or whatever rules. And finally, for this season, 24-25, they've introduced that subscription model with a monthly fee. I think it's $9.99 or $49.99 for the whole year. What do you think of the new subscription model for EHFT, Chris?
I think it's been a long time coming. We've been very lucky for a long time to get it for free, I would say. And I think that's something that John Ryan, saying as we're giving him credit, has also been saying for a long time. You know, he's always in his commentaries on Team Handball News spoken about the fact that, you know, this is, you know, like, enjoy it while it lasts, because this doesn't actually make sense to have everything completely free. And, you know, I, technically speaking, have been living outside of the EHFTV region for the last 13 years. So for me personally, it doesn't technically matter, because I've, one way or another, always had to, like in the countries I've lived in, Germany, Austria, and now Sweden, have, for the Champions League games at least, there's always been TV deals there. So they've been geo-blocked. Even though I was handed a free subscription because while I'm commentating, it's still geo-blocked. So I'm gonna have to pretend to be in Papua New Guinea or other remote handball countries like Ireland to be able to watch. I haven't tested that out yet, but yeah, I think it's not a surprise that it's come. I don't know what kind of impact it will have when it comes to the audience, and I don't know if we'll be able to get those stats at some point. Maybe it's something the EHF will provide at some point, because the people that are going to EHFTV to watch the games still would have had to make the effort to go to the EHFTV to watch the games in the past and to have the account. Now it's a question of, okay, are they going to be willing to pay for it? I think price-wise, it's what I would have expected. I think it's 45 euro for the year, right? So you're talking around €4 or €5 a month for that, if you exclude the two months where there are no Champions League games. So you're paying for the 9 or 10 months of the actual season. And so, yeah, I think that's fairly reasonable. And we're all used to paying a lot more for our subscriptions elsewhere. I think, of course, we'd all prefer that, like, for example, in Scandinavia, when it was on Viaplay, which now has Champions League football. So lost Champions League handball this season before last. Now it's got Champions League football. And people are paying enough for different subscriptions. So in that sense, yeah, maybe they'll lose some audience, but I think there will still be a lot of people who are willing to subscribe to it. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think that, really the Scandinavian countries are the only fully geo-blocked countries. Then the rest, actually, you're probably getting more handball available. Like in countries like Spain, for example, or Poland, I don't think they show outside their own country Champions League games. So you're probably getting access to that. It's true. The gravy train couldn't keep going. This was always going to happen. The thing that I'm a little bit disappointed in is that there wasn't a bigger upgrade to the platform. And actually, there has been an upgrade to the platform. There were a lot of issues last year that I faced that have smoothed out a little bit. That there was this most annoying issue of, like, on your phone, logging in, you have to put in your details, then you click into the game, then you put in your details, then it takes you out into your profile screen, so you have to go back into the game. That was like a really annoying loop that I got used to, but I was fine with it if it was free. Now that it's paid, there's definitely higher standards that are expected, and I think the platform has improved. I know a lot of people have faced some issues with streaming games, but that's, I think that hasn't been too widespread. And the thing I'm disappointed is, like, there probably should be an app that comes with it. If it is a streaming platform app, there is your EHF app or whatever integrated in, make it easier. You can cast, all of the functionality that you would expect from kind of a top streaming service. You would hope that would come with it, but yeah, maybe it's okay. It's not the worst thing in the world, and it will be interesting though if the geo blocking is going to be fully effective. VPNs have for a long time been a really easy route to any game that's on the EHF platforms. Now that it is kind of tied into countries, and like there is a link to TV rights, there's games that are available, not available, you would think that they would get stricter on that. There are many platforms that it is possible to just block those VPNs, and I don't know what is restricting EHF in doing this. Is it a cost thing, or just maybe they're okay with a few people using VPNs, and that is still better overall. So if that works, that would be good. But I think it was always going to happen. It should happen. Absolutely surprised it didn't happen earlier. And I think most listeners of this podcast, at least, will just go out and get that subscription. You got to pay for sport. It can't always be free.
Other changes that they've made, I guess, in order to make it value for money, they've added commentary to all of the Men's Champions League games now. Just match of the week for the women's competition so far. And so you hope also that that the money that comes in will also be used to kind of, let's say, create more content around it. I think there's been a lot of good contemporary content created by Nicholas Vinda and the Infront division that of this TV deal, and hopefully there'll be more of that kind of historical stuff as well. Because like the funny thing with the modern EHFTV is that it has nothing from the the 2010s when it was all hosted on Leola 1, the Austrian company's platform. So maybe they can get some of those old games and put them on as well, and create some content around that as well. Make it a bit more of a place to go back to.
Yeah. The commentary is definitely good. I think you can't be paying for a service with just crowd noises. So on the men's side, at least, there's coverage. The quality of the commentators is, as always, a question mark, especially this Irish guy that keeps popping up. Waste of time, really.
That's the top of their worries, I'm sure. So let's talk about the handball then. Well, as we're recording now, it's on Thursday afternoon. There's still a couple of games left in round 2, but I think we'll talk about kind of general opening impressions of the competition. And already from the games we've seen and some of the games in round 2, it's proven that you can't make too many like crazy judgment calls based on what we've seen. And I think a great example of that is the little quartet of Nantes, Kielce, Zagreb and Aalborg, who basically had reverse results in the first couple of weeks. Aalborg beating Nantes comfortably, then losing away to Zagreb. Zagreb, who the previous week lost heavily to Kielce and got that big win over Aalborg. Kielce, much depleted Kielce, losing to Nantes in match of the week last night. So that bloodbath in Group B already living up to what we all expected when we saw that draw made during the summer.
Yeah, exactly. I think probably even further, the fact that it's happening straight away and there's that mix of results, 6 teams already on 2 points in that group, Magdeburg being one of the teams on 0 points. So there's a lot to play for in that. Zagreb, well done, Zagreb. They just have Aalborg's number. I was looking at the result at home. I was looking at results, and actually I felt that Zagreb have done better against Aalborg over the last couple of seasons, but they only have 2 wins. But back when Zagreb were terrible, they're already putting it up against Aalborg. But it was an impressive win. I was a little bit surprised by it, especially because Aalborg looked so good in that first game. But Thomas Arnoldson, that is a young handball player's life. One day you score 11 from 11, including that ridiculous standing shot over and the 9 meters over the wall or around the wall, and then next time you go 2 from 7, and the team just didn't really get started. It's just a weird result, but at this stage, we're not too surprised with Zagreb actually being a good team, and it's probably good for handball that they are a good team.
Yeah, Matej Mandic had a stormer as well. He was just saving. We had 13 saves in the end, 36%, but it was the types of saves he was making from the penalties, from the wing as well. Had Sebastian Barthold in his pocket. I think seven saves against him. And yeah, Aalborg, I wouldn't be too worried about it. I think they know at this stage it's a marathon and not a sprint. And no Nicholas Landin yet for them as well, which I think is quite crucial when you see how the goalkeeper battle unfolded. Do you know what the story is with Landin?
I think he has an injury and he's out for a relatively long time. I think it's 2 months that he'll miss at the start of the season. So it is something that Aalborg will have to deal with. And, Fabian Norsten and Anton Hellberg are not names to strike fear in Champions League opponents. So that's going to be a weakness for them. Does anything strike your fancy over the first 1.5 match days?
Well, last night I had match of the week, Nantes beating Kielce, which was a proper scrappy affair, but it's just so good to have Nantes back. I mean, it feels like that every year. It's like it's so fresh every time when Nantes or Montpellier make their way back in. And it's like, oh, the atmosphere is so great. We've got the brass band playing, good times. And particularly with Nantes, with the whole announcer who's just like walking up and down the sideline, just chatting away the whole time. It's like, yeah, good. It did make me feel sad not to be there in person. And that is a change as well with all the games being commentated that I'll no longer be on site for match of the week, which I am not a fan of. But particularly on nights like this, when Nantes managed to get that win over Kielce. And yeah, they have an interesting team. They had no Aymeric Meen, but De La Bretèche did very well. Meen was out sick. But Kielce, I mean, it's like the same old problems, but it's even worse now that Andy Wolf is not there. It's bad times. Like, where are all these backcourt players gone? Szymon Siczko, out. Hassan Kada, still out. Did he ever exist? Was it a fever dream, this 2 meters 15 Egyptian? I don't know. Makeda hasn't made an appearance yet. And now Alex Dushabayev is out for the next 6 weeks as well. And so, yeah, they basically had 2 playmakers and Morito in the backcourt. And it really showed. Yeah, tough times for them. Tough times.
You know, it's really tough when Tomasz Gambala gets dusted off and put into attack at the very end, and they're like, we can't do anything, let the big boy shoot. And it kind of worked for a little bit. It's just really tough for Kielce. The injury troubles just continue to weigh on them. And there's, like Danny Dushabayev at this stage, he's just a bit of a waste of space. I'm going back to Danny Dushabayev being a waste of space. I'm just annoyed that he hasn't progressed. He's shown glimpses, but he hasn't progressed to a leader of a team or the best player of a team, or even just stepping into that role when needed. He will come up with some good goals for you when you have a really good team around them. But they really need him to step up. Who else is there? Olejniczak. Nice to see him getting a bit of play. I like Olejniczak. I have faith in him.
He is so chaotic. It's like, he's somebody who needs to do something to his body to calm himself down before the game. We had an old teammate, a playmaker, brother of Tom O'Branigan, Oisín, who Tom used to say to him, Oisín, you've got to sort yourself out, so to speak. Get something out of your system so that when you're on the court then you're a bit calmer. And this is exactly what Michael Olejniczak needs, because he's so chaotic and just like leaves the ball behind sometimes, or just goes like flying into defenders and they're just like, all right, well, you didn't actually move there, so okay. And then does something brilliant every now and then. Like he's a bit like Danny Dushabayev for me, but a very different type of player. But he's been around for so long now, you kind of expect some progression that hasn't come yet.
Yeah, and that's the feeling with Kielce, that they kind of abandoned a lot of players when they signed 30, 40 players and kind of committed to being at the top level. They had these guys in backup, and then didn't really give them any playing time, and now they're thrust into the spotlight and they're not ready for it, so they're struggling with that. Nantes, though, they look good, but very nervy at the end. I did watch those last 15 minutes were terrible. The game was completely won by then, but they were very nervy in the end. I do really like Ayoub Abdi. He's just a really, really nice player, and like his stat line is very nice. Did everything: 4 goals, 2 assists, 1 steal, 3 blocks. He's a real all-round player and a really, really good defender, which is something that I never really picked up on watching him for Algeria, or the very few games I'd watch him in France for Toulouse. So he is a really solid defender, and I think Nantes have a really good addition with him there at right back, and a big improvement on Makeda.
Yes, and that's what I like about the entire Nantes team, that it is a whole bunch of players who really like playing in defense as well. Like Brié right in there in the center of defense as well as a left back. And I think the only one that doesn't like playing in defense is Nicolas Tournat. And that's something they have to figure out with him. But yeah, it's a nice team. And Shuichi Yoshida from Japan as well, who came in and did a job for them in the center of defense. I didn't know too much about him, but he has been playing in Europe already for a few seasons and is only 23. So hopefully that'll be great if we have a good Japanese player performing week in, week out in the Champions League.
Yeah, he had a good Olympics, Yoshida. So that he definitely, but Nantes had already signed him. But he looks a good player for sure. Just a little side story on another Japanese star that came out through the Olympics while we're on Japanese players, and that was Kasuke Yasuhira. If you remember, the diminutive playmaker for Japan that really lit things on fire. I think he scored 39 goals in the Olympics. Was just a joy to watch, and he was previously with Plotsk actually. Then was on loan in Vardar, and you would have thought that he had this amazing Olympics. Here we go, Luke Steins 2.0. Get this player into a good club. He moved to Kuwait, Burgan SC in Kuwait, which is a questionable decision. He's still young, probably hasn't earned any money in his handball career, so
hopefully he's getting a good payday here in Kuwait.
You would hope so, but yeah, that I was a bit disappointed in that, and we know what going out to kind of the Middle East does to young players, as we see Andre Gomes as well back for Dinamo Bucharesti, back without an afro, fully shaved head, and a worse player?
Potentially. But he's in a good team. That's for sure. I'm excited about it. There's a couple of teams I'm really excited about this season. Dinamo is one of them. I don't know how deep they're going to go, but I like the makeup of the team. It's kind of a mixture of some solid pros and a few players that have maybe been not given a chance or abandoned by a team at some point. You have Kasparek in there. Thrastarsson has come in brilliantly.
Oh, yeah, he's been amazing. That's been so good to see. Really
happy about that. Langaro has joined from Barca. Alex Pascual has stayed there after Daddy left. Ali Zain, Gomez, as you mentioned. Branko Vujovic is joined as well. And Darko Djukic. Now there is a blast from the past.
A good VELUX man.
A VELUX man. That's something. I'm gonna have a call out to our fans at the end of this show for a future episode about VELUX Men.
Do you want to give a bit of
I'll give a bit of context.
Here?
Yeah, so there's been a trend on Twitter or X about Barclays Men, people who, let's say capture the imagination or are still in people's minds from approximately about 10 years ago, maybe 10 to 15 years ago, when the Premier League in England was sponsored by Barclays. And the league was known as the Barclays Premier League. In many people's eyes, just the Barclays. And I think, Alex, that the Champions League has that kind of association, for us at least, with VELUX. VELUX had a good decade as the sponsor of the competition and had this big spot on the top of the logo, the old logo, you remember, and just was ever present. And so that's something I want to delve into, our collective imaginations and mind, and what players are good, proper VELUX men who really defined that 2010s decade in the Champions League.
Yeah, and the Barclays Men point was, these are players that weren't at the top for too long. They may have just made a big impression for a season or two and then moved around, generally journeymen who moved around different clubs and made big impressions. We're not talking about, the big players like, I don't know, Wayne Rooney. It was kind of the smaller players. And I think Darko Djukic definitely fits into that.
Yeah, he's only 29. He's only 29. And you look at some of the clubs he played for. Like 2014-15, played for Metalurg. Then he broke onto the scene. We'll all remember that. If you don't have a look on YouTube, the penalty rebound shot behind the back for Besiktas in 2015-16, where he scored 87 goals for Besiktas in the Champions League. Then had a season in Kielce, or 2 seasons in Kielce, then went to Meshkov Brest, then went to Sporting, then Vardar, and was in Vardar until last season. Went back to Vardar until last season, and now with Dinamo Bucuresti. What a career. And he looks exactly the same as he did 10 years ago as well. It's marvelous. So he's a VELUX man, proper VELUX man. And this bit wasn't set up. This was really this is circumstance, which kind of proves why this could be a really fun feature to do. But Djukic in there, the budget Banhidi himself, Miklos Rosta, and João Lombroso, who I think has been kind of teetering on the edge of a breakthrough. So interesting to see how he does in the Champions League. And then Vladimir Chipara as well in goal. So, and David Davis as coach. I mean, just what's not to like about this team? It's a bunch of characters, I reckon, and there are 2 wins out of 2 so far. Away win against Płock, which I think is a big statement of intent.
Definitely, and it's not just they're great names, they're great players, but they are so. It's a good mix of quality players that are quite young or in their prime. That's a key here. It's not a random collection of journeymen. It's players. A lot of players on this team have maybe broke onto really big teams a bit too early in their career. Someone like Langaro in Barcelona, Thrasers in Kielce, Andre Gomes himself, Branko Vujovic. These guys were on these top level teams, and it came a little bit too early for them. And they've managed to find a really nice home in Dinamo Bucuresti. And my only final point on Dinamo is Haniel Langaro is incredible for the least athletic man I've ever seen play as a backcourt player in handball.
And you've seen me play. You've seen yourself play.
I think if we had a jump off, it would be pretty close to Langaro. The guy, he's a slithery snake. He's able to find space. He's a clever player, but one thing he's not is an athletic beast. And funny enough, that is, they have Andre Gomes who's just pure athleticism, no brain, and Aniel Langaro, who's all brain, no athleticism. Put them together into one player, and anything can happen for Dinamo Bucharest.
Yeah, hopefully they're roommates this season, and they can learn a few things off each other. A team that excites me in a similar way, but at a higher echelon, is Szeged. Could this be Szeged's year to do something at long last? And this is maybe classic pitfall of talking about this after just one game, and what a one game it was, beating Magdeburg at home. We'll see how they do tonight against Barca. But I just really like the look and the balance of this squad. I think they've made some signings which are not necessarily kind of like, they haven't totally broken the bank to make it happen. But I really like the players they've brought in. Mikkel Appelgren as coach, who was Elverum coach a few years ago. He's joined from Severhof, and he's brought a Nordic flair to the team. Tobias Tullin, Magnus Rød, and Janis Daudi Smarson in there. Smarson and Kukic as your two playmakers is fantastic.
It is, and they looked really good and structured very quickly. That was my impression, that with Mikkel Appelgren coming in, they very quickly transitioned to just the style and the play, the speed. It looked like it clicked straight away, and a 31-29 win against Magdeburg is nothing to really joke about here. It's a really impressive win right at the top. They are going to play Barcelona in an hour, and when you're listening to this episode, you'll know if Szeged are for real.
I mean, you can lose away to Barca. I think that's okay. It's acceptable in round two. It's a really nice squad, and just really balanced. I mean, the left and right back positions are really solid. I think it's kind of classic Szeged in a way that they have the big men in there still. It's Garcia and Rød on one side, Bodo, Machkovchek, and Bogojevic, who really impressed me a few seasons ago when he played for Severhof, and he was in Björnbo Silkeborg the last couple of seasons. So it may be a bit of a step up for him. The wingers, Sostaric, Frimmel, and Jelenic, all really good. And they've brought in a bit of bite as well on the line. Gleb Kalarash is back. Another VELUX man.
Oh, he's such a VELUX man.
He's a VELUX man. He's in. He's back from wherever the hell he's been. He was in Rhein-Neckar-Löwen for a while, wasn't he? Gleb Kalarash.
He was at Varder. Then he was knocking around Germany for a little while.
Yeah.
And he's back in there to just break some people up in the Champions League.
I mean, well, he believe it or not, he was with Szeged last season, but I just didn't notice him at all.
I don't think he played.
I don't know if he was injured for the whole season, but he is only 33, which for his style of play is perfect. So yeah, he's coming in. Hopefully we'll have a big role to play, and Jeremy Toto as well, and Roland Mickler had a huge game against Magdeburg.
I'm gonna say I'm gonna throw this out already. Throw it out already. It could be hugely reactionary, but I'm a little bit worried about Magdeburg this season.
Interesting. Do you think that's because they are not gonna progress from last year and they were found out a little bit at the end of last season?
So the injury to Felix Klar is a big one, and I don't know how long he's out, but I think it's at least the first quarter. It's an extensive injury, and right now they have Philip Weber playing left back, and that's enough concern for Magdeburg if you have Philip Weber being your starting left back. They did obviously sign Manuel Zender, but he hasn't really had a chance to impress yet. He's getting very few minutes. Not really sure why. I would say that it is a defensive worry. I think with, they're really kind of focusing their team on a stronger defensive team, with Lagergren starting at right back ahead of Magnussen, Zender not getting the opportunity. So there's a real focus on that. I believe that, they don't really have the size to play a player who can't at least contribute in some way to defense, and Zender just didn't have to do that in Eisenach because he was too busy scoring a million goals every week, which is totally fine. So I think that's the reason why he's being held back. And I agree, there's just not much has changed. If anything, this team has gotten weaker from last year. And last year they hit a wall. And of course, we're talking about, at the very, very top here. When we talk about Magdeburg, it's not getting through the Champions League group stages. It's not even like getting into the Champions League and the Bundesliga. It's winning both of those. And I think in that sense, I'm a little bit worried that Christiansen is the key for them. I think he needs to progress, or so he was incredible, got those terrible injuries, has been building up from that, and I don't think he's hit anywhere. I think the issue is that he was progressing as a player really rapidly when he got those injuries in the final of the Champions League. But he was like on this insane upward trajectory, and that got completely short-circuited. So now he has to find a way to not only get back to where he was, but continue improving. And that's difficult. It's difficult for a player who has a long injury background as well. But I'm just a little bit worried. But Nicola Portner is back.
Yes.
So
he is. And yeah, I think with Zander, he'll find his way into it. I think it's probably a case of him having to learn the ropes. And by the time this is out, he may well have scored 12 goals against Kolstad tonight, which feels like the perfect game for him to just be kind of let loose and tear apart the Norwegians at home. But yeah, I think with they made an interesting signing with Antonio Sarradia as well as a number 2 defender. And it seems like he's going to be number 2 on the left-hand side, and O'Sullivan goes into the middle there. So they're still sticking to those 2 players coming on and off. And then the question is, as you said, whether they basically have a decision to make, whether to go with Magnussen as the player to come on in the attack, or someone like Zander, or Zander has to get going in defense for the team. He's not exactly small, is he, Manuel Zander? He seems like a fairly well-built guy. From a Magdeburg perspective, he's 1.90 m tall, so he's bigger than a few of them. And I think he'll be okay. He's got a lot of adjusting to do, going from being a massive fish in Eisenach to being just another good player in one of the best teams in the world.
Yeah. So the storyline on the first match week was, of course, the Germany versus Hungary matchups. And Hungary came out on top with Veszprém beating Füchse Berlin. It was exciting to see Matthias Gisel in the Champions League. He started off with 10 goals, doing what he does best, including that unbelievable goal where he got the ball at right back, somehow took 3 steps and ended up on the very, very far left side. He did take a bounce in the middle. It was all legal. On the very left side, contorted his body, spun it with the outside of his left hand around Corrales in goal. That was, it was real showtime, Gisel. And, Füchse Berlin did look very good at times. They came out into a really big lead. They were up by about 5 goals in the first half, but Veszprém were able to come back. Nedim Remili had a fantastic game, which is nice to see.
Yeah, 11 goals from 18 for him. Did you notice any changes in the approach with Javi Pascual as coach, or maybe too early? Because the squad hasn't changed that much when you think about the big players in the team. But with the coach coming in, always interesting to see whether there's been adaptations. I mean, Lucas Sindrich, probably the big signing in terms of the backcourt.
It wasn't too noticeable, and Sindrich had still quite a smaller part to play. He hasn't kind of come in as the dominant force. Remili is the starting playmaker, and they're still relying on Casado and Eldera more than Sindrich. He's just kind of another bullet in the chamber for West Brom, a very good silver bullet, but it hasn't. Didn't notice any dramatic changes, and they really interchanged their backcourt quite a lot. Sandell, Kosaradov's not really breaking through yet, but yeah, it looked good. It did. It's crazy. The game finished 32-31, but both goalkeepers made 17 saves. So it was a wild game. A game that is the style that Füchse Berlin play. And we've seen West Brom, exchange blows at, with fast teams before. So the scoreline probably is a bit. It doesn't fully give an impression of what a wild game it was. And to that point, also, West Brom won quite easily with 6 minutes left. They were up 31-26, and then Füchse Berlin made a huge run at the end, and it came down to a save from Corrales at the end to keep the victory for West Brom. So Füchse Berlin, first impressions, is streaky, and that was it. For West Brom, not a significant change.
Yeah, I think with Berlin, they're gonna try and figure out, I guess, how they're gonna deal with balancing the competitions and
just play the same players all the time. Play the same players all the time.
Maybe that will be the way they do it, like they always do. But it may come back to bite them. I'm gonna say, Alex, on October 17th, here's a date for your diary and for all the American handball fans out there, not just Americans, but those intrigued in American handball. I reckon that could be when we see an American player in the Champions League. Benjamin Edwards is part of the West Brom squad.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, brought in over the summer. Actually, did play against. He played against Berlin, in fact, didn't he, in a preseason test match, which John Ryan was posting about. The reason I say October 17th is because West Brom have a home game against Fredericia from Denmark. So maybe that is an opportunity to have spot number 16 in the squad for a young American who, from the little I've seen of him, been really impressed. He's a very talented backcourt player. And I think born in Tatabánya, grew up in Hungary, so he's very much a local boy in that regard as well. So that'll be fun to see if he makes the breakthrough for the team at some point. But seems if he was trusted enough to go to a preseason tournament away from home, then he may well be trusted in a game at some point in the group phase.
I think the last one, and I know we've talked about almost every team in this Champions League launch podcast, but Sporting came out and made a real statement, beating Visa Plus 34-29 and looking really, really good. I think they won very comfortably. They will. They are going to be playing
Fredericia tonight, so
play
should make it 2 out of 2.
So should make it 2 out of 2. Although Fredericia looked looked interesting at times. We might talk about them at a later point, but Sporting, Martin Costa, 10 goals, 6 assists. Francisco Costa, 6 goals, 4 assists. And those two boys are going to just keep doing that for this whole competition, and they look very solid. They look so much better than Porto have in the past, where Porto were never a really weak team. They really put it up against the top oppositions, but you never really thought for a while now that they're going to actually get rolling, get a couple of wins, and look to challenge at any higher level than the playoffs. But with Sporting, I'm just full of hope. They have just such a nice team. Our boy Salvador playing. He is the captain. Yeah. He's an incredible defensive player, and then he does get to play in attack as well for Sporting. Nathan Suarez, very fun player. Jan Guri is a very talented Spanish left back who is a real star in the youth championship level. And Muhammad Ali.
I was hoping you'd mention him.
It's a real bonus. I didn't even... that one went over my head during the summer that he made the move to Sporting, but... a real fan
what an Olympics
favorite.
He had.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I think that's it. Is really solid. And then I like the look of the wings as well. Portela and Gassama on one side, Branquinho on the left wing, and they've taken like some of the best things from Porto in Branquinho, and Ori Thorkelson as well, who I really enjoy. He's a hectic. Kind of chaotic type of left winger, the Icelandic winger who, could like score an absolute screamer and then the next shot smack the keeper in the head, both while trying to do the same thing. So watch out for him as well. They're a really fun team, and it's in this Group A, which is a little bit open. We talked about Group B being a bloodbath, but. Group A with the likes of Fredericia and Pallister, I think Sporting are in a good position to qualify. But I think even the teams that they have ahead of them, or, they have the mid-level teams, Bucharesti and Plock, easily the same level or can be better. And then even the teams ahead of them, PSG and Füchse Berlin, are not impenetrable. That Sporting have beaten Füchse Berlin in the past. Yeah. You'd fancy a home win as a chance against Westbrem, Paris and Berlin on a good day.
We won't talk about Paris too much, but they've been winning, but making it look very, very difficult. So we'll have to see how that shapes up.
Before we let you go, a call out then officially to all of you fans, and we'll put it on our socials as well, and on Patreon and on our Discord as well, trying to get your suggestions for VELUX Men, players who during the VELUX EHF Champions League era, when they were sponsors, that are stuck in your memory, not necessarily for being the best player at the time, but players who were just always thereabouts, or did something special, or just kind of encapsulate the spirit of the 2010s in the Champions League. And let's hear what your players are, and we'll have a dedicated show about that in a couple of weeks, I reckon.
Any players come to the top of your head already? And I'm trying to figure out when VELUX started the sponsorship.
I think 2010 was the first Final Four. So they were definitely sponsors then. So I would say like the 2010 to the 2010s in general would be a good period to look back on, basically before COVID, the good old days. Who would one player that just like really sticks out, but is maybe a little bit too high? It's a good example to give as a player is maybe a little too good is Kirill Lazarov, because he just like penetrates my mind completely. He was
VELUX man.
He's a VELUX king. but maybe a little bit too good. But think about your Besiktas players. Think about your Dynamo Minsk players. Remember them?
I'm gonna give two players, one like very niche player and one who is I really count as a VELUX man, who's a bigger player, but Sergei Rutenka to me is a VELUX man. While he was one of the best players in that time, he's kind of on the other side. He had this hunchback that just made him look unique. While he'd still score 13 goals in games for the likes of Barcelona. I think Sergei Rutenka is definitely a VELUX man for me, and one niche one. Martin Stranovski.
Stranovski.
That's one to Google for you. Czech winger.
Yes. Yeah. Champions League winner, no less, I believe, as well. Was at least in some Final Fours. And one that's come to my mind now is Jonas Trukanovicius.
Oh, the truck.
The trucker.
The truck.
He's one with his Montpellier days. And I think you probably able to throw in like Flensburg and Zagreb players in there. So there's so many different ways to look at it. Which and I think the key to speaking of Flensburg, it was Mr. VELUX himself, Lars Christiansen, who was like their ambassador for years. But it's what I think is nice about it is that everyone listening will have their own players that kind of come to mind and their own little stories that come with it. But that coming up in the near future. And thank you all for listening. Enjoy the games coming up. The non-stop handball in domestic and Champions League. We'll be back soon. Goodbye.